Hallo iedereen, welkom bij Dutch&Go. Today we're going to talk about me, myself, and I. Let's go. Well, I actually don't necessarily want to talk about me or my personal life or I don't know what I do, but rather I want to talk a little bit about what I'm aiming for when I'm teaching, what I'm aiming for with this YouTube channel, a little bit my methods and my general way of thinking. So that's what I'm going to be talking a little bit about today. So first of all, I think as a general rule when it comes to my classes and the way that I try to teach, and maybe possible teachers will find this tip useful too, I try to focus on having a good conversation. Of course, if you are very much still a beginner and you're just learning the alphabet and learning the first words and sentences and what have you, of course I realize that having a good conversation is not necessarily possible. But however, I do, as soon as I can, I try to move out of like the standardized phrases of such as waar kom jij vandaan en waar woon jij en wat is jouw beroep, to more open-ended questions such as wat zijn jouw plannen voor het weekend, wat zijn jouw hobbies, etc. In which I try to give the student free space to talk, maybe ask some follow-up questions. I'll really try to imagine that it's like, you know, a very small bubble of interaction in which I'll show interest in whatever it is that my student is saying and ask follow-up questions. And maybe even based on that, it would give them some recommendations. So no matter if you're interested in horoscopes, astrology, or genetic studies, you can already talk a little bit about that, and maybe I can give you some recommendations in Dutch for that too. That way I get to know you a little bit better. That way I get to know a little bit better what drives my students, what they like, what they find interesting, what their life is like, and get to help them. So that's always my goal, and of course in the beginning this bubble of spontaneous conversation is quite a small bubble, but it will expand over time, over class, and it will, you know, after months and months of practice will probably become like the whole class, where it's not only spontaneous conversation but where the whole class takes place in Dutch, and because basically I want to stimulate an environment where the student feels comfortable to talk and where the student also finds their own voice. I believe that vocabulary comes naturally as you speak more and more often, but things like pace of speaking, the ease with which you speak, how comfortable you are, etc. That is something that you cannot really learn from just learning grammar or vocabulary. That is only something that you can discover in spontaneous conversation. And that's what I'm always trying to stimulate, because that way you can also just always feel that Dutch, no matter if you're a beginner or already more advanced, is a code that kind of suits you very well, if that makes sense. A second question that I've been asked a lot, and something that I'm always thinking about and chewing on, is why do I make these videos in English, and why do I sometimes teach partially classes in English as well when I'm explaining grammar, rules, giving tips, etc. Well, you can argue about that. You can definitely also say I'll do the whole thing in Dutch, and that way even people who don't speak English will understand me as well. However, I personally am quite a fan of you not having to focus on Dutch in order to understand tips, in order to understand grammar rules, in order to understand what I'm trying to explain. I personally don't think it's necessarily super productive, because I don't necessarily want you in those moments to focus on the Dutch language as it is, but rather I want you to absorb a study tip, a certain method, idea, trick, simile, metaphor, whatever. And then I think the goal here is then not about you being in touch with Dutch and hearing it in Dutch, but just rather absorbing the technique, absorbing the method, understanding the method, and rather using that. So that's also why I make these videos in English. Of course, I'm well aware that I might exclude some people who do not speak English. However, there's never going to be something perfect for everyone, and probably if I were to make all of my videos in Dutch, I would probably also get some criticisms that it might be hard to follow, that that it's not easy to be understood. But because I feel that when it comes to grammar and learning grammar, a lot of textbooks and study books still fail miserably, unfortunately. And with these videos, I'm just trying to help you understand grammar better, and then I don't want you to focus so much on understanding the Dutch language as an added filter too, when the grammar itself is already difficult enough. A third thing that I want to talk about is that I really try to use the point of view of the students and focus on the fact that you can learn Dutch using anything, using any material. Of course, it very much depends on what your goals are, what it is that you want to do with Dutch, why you're learning Dutch, if you need to take an exam or not. But if you have very specific interests and you only use Dutch in specific situations, then I really believe that you can basically make a course depending on the interests of the students. So for example, if someone is only interested in, say, movies and movie history, then, as I have actually done already, you can pretty much teach a medium A2 to B1 course using only movies and using only movie genres and using the vocabulary and the grammar that you would normally teach for an A2 or B1, but using movies and movie examples in that case too, just to get the attention of the students. I don't think there's a need to follow textbooks rigorously if that's not really where the priority of the student is at. And I think that having that kind of creativity, whether someone is, as I said before, also like interested in astrology or interested in something that maybe I myself do not find interesting, sports or I don't know what, it's always interesting to and important to understand what is interesting to the student and see if you can give him or her something equivalent in Dutch too, that will help him or her or motivate him or her to learn the language from the point of view of his or her own specific interests. Another thing that I often do is to create a relaxed environment. I hope that that's also clear from these videos, and that also happens a lot in my class, that we create a relaxed environment, making jokes, laughing, not taking it too seriously. I think all of that is super important because, first of all, I don't want any nervous students. I don't want anyone to feel nervous in class. I don't want anybody to feel insecure. I want these videos and I want my classes to be a safe space in which you can say whatever you want, in which you can ask whatever you want, no matter maybe how stupid you might think that the question is, but maybe it's not, and in which you're just free to say what you want and make mistakes and don't be punished for them, but rather be rewarded for speaking with a correction where applicable or an alternative way of saying or whatever. And I think the best way to do that, to also discover that sort of element of natural speech in which I was talking about in the beginning of the video, I think, well, a relaxed environment will get you very, very far. Finally, something that I think was also one of my main points of contention is when I'm flickering through textbooks and grammar books, etc. The grammar is often not practical. So that's why with these YouTube videos and with classes in general, I only try to focus on grammar that you can actually use, show how you're supposed to use it, and create natural speaking situations in which you would use that particular piece of grammar. Otherwise, I think it's a little bit pointless, because you don't want to just learn like abstract grammar and then make like an exercise with sentences where you sort of wonder, yeah, but when would I use that? In what situation would I use that? So I try to make the examples that I give, the grammar that I teach, to make that situationally dependent and make it clear when you would use that and why it would be useful to learn, or maybe why not? Case in point, for example, this whole de and het discussion. I've already explained that several times, that I personally don't think it's so useful to really focus that much on the difference between de and het. You'll learn it a little bit automatically anyhow. You'll learn it when you're studying vocabulary, and other than that, mistakes with de and het are unavoidable, and also they don't really have a great impact on how you are understood or perceived. I think there are other, things to focus on first. So there you go. That was a little bit about me, myself, how I see teaching classes, this YouTube channel, why I like to speak in English for these kinds of videos. I hope that clarified certain questions that you might have had. And I hope this was also maybe helpful for teachers who are looking for inspiration or trying to find other angles to make their classes interesting. And maybe that was interesting for those teachers too. Let me know in the comment box down below if you have any other questions for me that I could answer. Thank you so much for watching en tot de volgende keer. Dag!